In the middle of Manhattan, at the intersection of 5th Avenue, Broadway, and 23rd Street, there is a building that looks almost impossible. It is not the tallest building in New York. It is not the most expensive. It does not have a billion-dollar penthouse, a private club in the sky, or a glass observation deck hanging over the city. But it may be the most recognizable skyscraper in America. A 22-story triangle of limestone, terracotta, and steel squeezed onto one of the strangest pieces of land in New York City. Its narrowest point is so sharp that it looks less like a building and more like the bow of a ship cutting through Manhattan traffic. This is the Flatiron Building. For more than a century, it has been photographed by tourists, painted by artists, used in movies, printed on postcards, and treated as one of the purest symbols of old New York. It is the kind of building people stop in the street to stare at, even if they have seen it 100 times before. And yet, for years, almost nobody was inside. Since 2019, one of New York's most iconic buildings has sat largely empty. Its last major tenant left. Its owners went to war in court. A judge forced the building to auction. A mystery bidder won it for $190 million, then disappeared without paying the deposit. The building went back to auction. The owners bought it again. And now, after years of lawsuits, scaffolding, failed bids, and renovation plans, the Flatiron is finally being converted into ultra-luxury homes. For the first time in its 124-year history, people may actually live inside the building everyone recognizes. But that raises one uncomfortable question. How does one of the most famous buildings in the world sit empty for years in the middle of Manhattan? How does a building that everyone loves become a building nobody can actually use? And why did it take a lawsuit, a failed auction, hundreds of millions in financing, and a complete residential conversion just to bring life back into New York's most iconic skyscraper? Let me show you inside the Flatiron Building, the skyscraper nobody wanted to stay in until the city finally ran out of other options. To understand why the Flatiron became such a strange real estate problem, you have to start with the land. Before the building existed, the site itself was already unusual. Broadway and 5th Avenue do not run parallel through this part of Manhattan. They slice across each other at an angle, creating a triangular island of land at 23rd Street, directly across from Madison Square Park. Most developers would have seen that plot as a problem. It was too narrow, too awkward, too exposed. The northern tip was only a few feet wide. The entire site looked like a leftover scrap of Manhattan that did not fit the grid. But in the early 1900s, New York was changing. The city was growing upward. Steel frame construction was beginning to transform what architects believed a building could be. Developers were starting to realize that a strange piece of land could become valuable if you were brave enough to build vertically. The Fuller Company, a major construction firm, took the risk. They wanted a new headquarters that would advertise their power, their engineering skill, and their confidence in the future of the skyscraper. So they hired Daniel Burnham, one of the most famous architects in America. Burnham did not try to fight the shape of the land. He embraced it. He designed a building that matched the triangle exactly, a narrow, wedge-shaped tower rising 285 feet into the air with a steel skeleton frame hidden behind a classical Beaux-Arts facade. At the time, this was shocking. Many New Yorkers did not see a masterpiece. They saw a stunt. Critics called it Burnham's Folly. Some people believed the wind would knock it down. Others mocked its strange shape and compared it to a slice of pie or a giant clothes iron. That nickname stuck. The Fuller Building became the Flatiron Building, and almost immediately the building became famous for reasons nobody had planned. Its sharp, triangular shape created a wind tunnel at the intersection. Air rushing down Broadway and 5th Avenue would collide around the prow of the building, creating sudden gusts that whipped through 23rd Street. Papers flew out of people's hands. Hats blew into traffic. In the early 1900s, men would gather near the building, hoping the wind would lift women's skirts, creating such a nuisance that police had to chase them away. The building was strange, it was controversial, it was mocked, and then New York fell in love with it. Before we dive into how this architectural icon became trapped in years of legal and financial chaos, a quick question. Do you enjoy these deep dives into massive engineering failures, abandoned megaprojects, and the hidden stories behind the world's most famous buildings? If so, subscribe now and turn on the notification bell. Here on MadeFor, we bring you the most fascinating, high-stakes stories behind the world's biggest structures every single week. From skyscrapers and stadiums to billion-dollar infrastructure and forgotten icons, we break down how these buildings are created and what happens when they stop working. Subscribe using the link in the description or click the button below. Your support is what allows us to keep making these documentaries. Now, let us look at how the Flatiron Building went from a mocked triangle of steel to one of the most beloved buildings in the world, and then to one of Manhattan's strangest empty towers. The reason the Flatiron survived its early critics is simple. It worked. The steel frame did exactly what the skeptics thought it could not do. It allowed the building to rise tall and narrow on a plot that looked nearly impossible. The walls did not have to carry the full load. The structure was hidden inside, distributing weight through a steel skeleton and down into the foundations below. This was the future of skyscrapers. The Flatiron was not just a beautiful oddity, it was part of a revolution in how cities were built. And because of its location, there was no hiding it. Most skyscrapers are seen from below, packed into dense streets where their full shape is difficult to understand. The Flatiron was different because it stood at the convergence of two great avenues. With Madison Square Park just to the north, people could see the whole building at once. From the park, it looked like a massive ship sailing into the city. Photographers became obsessed with it. Alfred Stieglitz captured it in snow and fog. Painters used it as a symbol of modern New York. Postcards carried its image around the world. Later, movies and television turned it into visual shorthand for Manhattan itself. The Flatiron was never just an office building. It was a character. It was old New York in physical form. For most of the 20th century, the building functioned as commercial office space. Publishing companies, creative firms, small businesses, and media tenants moved in and out of its triangular floors. The unusual layout made it difficult, but also memorable. You could not get the giant open floor plates of a modern glass tower. You got narrow corners, angled walls, historic windows, and the prestige of working inside a landmark. For a long time, that was enough. But the same things that made the Flatiron charming eventually made it difficult to keep competitive. The building was old, very old. Its systems belonged to another era. Its elevators, electrical infrastructure, plumbing, heating, ventilation, and air conditioning all needed major upgrades. The office market was changing. Modern tenants wanted flexible floors, advanced mechanical systems, high-speed infrastructure, and clean open space. The Flatiron had history, but history does not automatically pay the bills. Its last major tenant, Macmillan Publishers, occupied the building for years. Then in 2019, Macmillan left. The lights went out, and the Flatiron became something almost impossible to imagine. One of the most photographed buildings in the world, sitting empty in the middle of Manhattan. At first, this might sound like a temporary problem. Buildings lose tenants all the time. Owners renovate them, lease them again, and move on. But the Flatiron was not an ordinary office tower. It was owned by multiple stakeholders who did not agree on what should happen next. Some wanted to convert it into luxury residences. Others resisted the plan. The building needed enormous upgrades, but no single path forward had full agreement. This is where the Flatiron entered its own kind of real estate trap. On one side, keeping it as an office building was becoming harder to justify. The building's shape, and infrastructure made it less attractive to modern office tenants, especially after 2020, when the entire Manhattan office market began to change. On the other side, converting it into residences was incredibly complicated. This was a national historic landmark. You could not simply gut it like a normal building. Every window, facade detail, cornice, and piece of historic fabric mattered. Every major change required approvals. The building's triangular geometry meant that normal apartment layouts would not work. Elevators, mechanical systems, fire safety, plumbing, and luxury amenities all had to be inserted into a structure designed more than a century earlier for a completely different purpose. You could not leave it alone, but you could not easily change it either. And because the owners could not agree, the courts got involved. In 2023, a judge ordered the Flatiron Building to be sold at public auction. It was one of the strangest moments in modern New York real estate. Here was one of the most famous buildings on earth, standing on a courthouse auction block like a distressed asset. The bidding began. Real estate insiders watched closely. The majority ownership group hoped to regain control. Then suddenly, a man named Jacob Garlick appeared and bid $190 million. He won. For a moment, it looked like the Flatiron had a new owner, but then came the problem. Under the rules of the auction, Garlick had to pay a 10% deposit, $19 million, to complete the deal. He did not pay it. The money never arrived. The winning bid collapsed. The $190 million sale vanished. It was as if someone had walked into one of the most serious real estate auctions in New York, bought one of the most famous buildings in America, and then simply walked away. The entire situation made the Flatiron feel less like a trophy asset and more like a cursed object. The court had to schedule a second auction. This time, the previous majority stakeholders won the building back for $161 million, but the damage had been done. The Flatiron had spent years empty. Its ownership battle had become public. Its failed auction had become a national story, and the question around the building had changed. It was no longer just who owns the Flatiron. It was, what can this building actually become? The answer was luxury housing. For the first time since it opened in 1902, the Flatiron Building would be converted from offices into private residences. This sounds simple until you understand what that actually means. To turn a 124-year-old triangular office tower into luxury condos, developers have to rebuild the building from the inside without destroying what makes it valuable from the outside. The facade must be restored. Historic terracotta details must be repaired. More than 1,000 windows need to be replaced or upgraded. The interiors have to be completely reimagined. Modern plumbing and electrical systems have to be threaded through an old structure. Elevators must serve private residences. Fire safety systems must meet modern codes. Mechanical systems have to fit into a landmark that was never designed for modern residential life. And then comes the geometry. Most apartment buildings are rectangles. Rooms stack neatly. Plumbing lines align. Corridors make sense. The Flatiron is a triangle. Every floor narrows toward the prow. Every apartment has to deal with odd angles, unusual sightlines, and a shape that is beautiful from the street, but brutally difficult to plan from the inside. This is why the Flatiron is so fascinating. The very thing that makes it iconic also makes it difficult to use. Its shape is its brand and its problem. Developers are now turning that problem into luxury. The sharp corners, arched windows, odd floor plates, and historic details are being repackaged as exclusivity. Instead of trying to make the Flatiron behave like a normal building, the new plan sells the fact that it is not normal at all. There will be only a limited number of residences. Prices are expected to run into the millions, with some units reaching tens of millions of dollars. The building will have luxury amenities, restored details, and for the first time, permanent nighttime lighting that will illuminate its facade. After years of darkness, the Flatiron is being prepared to glow. But that does not erase the bigger lesson. The Flatiron Building proves that fame does not make a building easy to save. In fact, fame can make everything harder. Because when a building is ordinary, you can tear it down, gut it, rebuild it, or forget it. But when a building is iconic, every decision becomes political, emotional, expensive, and public. Nobody wants to be the person who ruins the Flatiron. Nobody wants to be the owner who lets it decay. Nobody wants to spend hundreds of millions restoring a building that cannot easily function as modern offices. And nobody wants to admit that one of the most beloved buildings in New York can sit empty for years because the math, the law, and the architecture refuse to cooperate. That is the real story here. Not that nobody loves the Flatiron, everyone loves the Flatiron. The problem is that loving a building and making that building useful are two completely different things. The Flatiron was built on a piece of land nobody knew what to do with. It was mocked as a folly. It was expected to fail in the wind. It became one of the most photographed structures in the world. Then, more than a century later, it became empty again because the modern city no longer knew what to do with it. That is the paradox of New York architecture. The city creates icons, then has to figure out how to make them survive the next century. And sometimes, survival means changing the building's entire purpose. The Flatiron is not being saved by nostalgia alone. It is being saved because the residential market found a way to turn its limitations into luxury. Its awkward floors become rare layouts. Its old windows become historic views. Its unusual shape becomes a selling point. Its impossible geometry becomes exclusivity. But even now, the ending is not guaranteed. Luxury condos can bring money back into the building. New lighting can bring the facade back to life. The restoration can return the Flatiron to the skyline in a way New Yorkers have never seen before. But it also raises a harder question. When an icon becomes too expensive and complicated for ordinary use, who is it really being saved for? Is the Flatiron being revived for New York? Or is it being turned into another trophy address for people who can afford to buy a piece of history? For more than 120 years, the Flatiron Building belonged to the street. It belonged to the photographers in Madison Square Park, the workers rushing past it, the tourists looking up from the crosswalk, the artists sketching its impossible shape, and the millions of people who have used it as proof that New York can turn even the strangest piece of land into a masterpiece. Now, for the first time, people may finally live inside it, but only a very small number of them. The building that everyone recognizes is becoming a building almost nobody will ever enter. And maybe that is the final irony. The Flatiron was once mocked because people thought it could not survive. Now it is so beloved that it can only survive by becoming one of the most exclusive addresses in the city. So what do you think? Is converting the Flatiron Building into luxury condos the right way to save one of New York's greatest icons? Or should a building this famous have remained something more public? An office, a museum, a hotel, or a space regular New Yorkers could actually experience? Let me know what you think in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this deep dive into one of America's most iconic buildings, hit the like button and subscribe to MadeFor. We will see you in the next one.